Greetings. My name is Michael Erlewine, and I thought that we could talk about some poems that I put together and maybe something about what they mean. Now, poetry has been for me forever in my life a way to record what's going on inside of me. I've never, I don't sit down and just write poetry like as a profession or on purpose. And I don't write poetry that often, but when I do write a poem, it's always in response to some realization or other, something that I'm personally going through that finally becomes clear to me. So I don't just try to write a poem. I do use poetry as a way of clarifying my actual experience and as a way to lock, let's say, an emerging realization about life into some form that can serve to bring to mind for me again and again the actual experience that I'm trying to understand and that I'm going through. If I can capture the experience in a poem, I know that I have realized something or other about myself and my life. And by carefully reciting the poem aloud to myself, by articulating each word with understanding, the idea the poem captures can live again for me and be present in my mind. Now, whether others can read my poetry or not, whether the captured vision will be present in the minds of readers, I just can't say. And that's why this is kind of an experiment. I only know it works for me, and I write these poems for my own inner satisfaction, not for the public. I do it, I kind of can't not do it because I always am trying to clarify. I mean, there's some humorous poems, a few of them that are just fun, and that aren't really motivated by some deep experience. But there's nothing in this world that's as satisfying to me than having some realization and that resulting in a new poem. That being said, I hope that those of you who read my poems or listen to this, that you may enjoy them too. Of course, like always, I dedicate any merit of these works to all of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, saints, and sincere practitioners of any faith, that they may bring light and realization to all sentient beings. The particular group of poems I'm going to read, and I'm just going to wander through them myself and figure out what ones to read, are all kind of what I call Dharma poems. And I should say a little bit about what that means. First of all, these are the kind of poems I've always written, but also I've found them something similar when I began to study Tibetan Buddhists and Tibetan Buddhism and their concepts. In fact, they have an incredible idea of poetry that's so totally different than Western poetry that it's been inspiring to me. And what they do is they have a whole kind of poetry called doas. And they're poems of spiritual experience rather than just poems about what's personally happening to them. It's about, and it's exactly what I do. When they go through changes, they write about them, but they have like a whole genre, and it's incredible. I mean, it's way over my head, most of it, because I haven't experienced a lot of what they are able to write about, and I have no idea what's lost in translation. But for me, writing about, and it's, when I meet someone, like I meet someone new or even someone I know, always the first thing I say to them, I'm sure they get deadly tired of it, is like, what's new? What gets you up in the morning? What are you going through? What's happening inside of you? That's always what I'm interested in, probably because I'm interested in it for myself, in my own mind. I'm always watching my mind. And since I've been studying and practicing Tibetan meditation for since 1974 at least, kind of seriously, and then ever more seriously, a lot of the poems I'm going to read to you are about that whole process. I think that I will try to talk about the poem before I read you the poem. I'm not sure that's a good idea, but again, this whole thing's an experiment for me. This is a little poem about learning to meditate, and the whole idea of it is that we can't force meditation on ourselves. We can learn to meditate, but we can't just, by brute force of our will, force the mind to rest. We have to learn to allow the mind naturally to come to rest. So this is just a little 4-line poem, and it's called The Rest of the Mind. You cannot rest the mind, but you can let the mind rest. Just let go and don't mind the rest. Here's another little one. Now this is a more complicated one, or more advanced one, in the sense that it has to do with not basic meditation, not with shamatha meditation, but more with vipassana meditation. And let me just read it to you, and let's just see how it comes out. It's called Nothing is Something. Thank you, Rinpoche, for pointing something out, that there is nothing to be pointed out, that nothing can be pointed out, including nothing. Nothing also cannot be pointed out. To me, that's really something. In learning meditation, one of the greatest obstacles is our idea of what meditation is. Because it's not like music if you're learning to play an instrument where you can listen to music, be inspired, and then go have enough inspiration to practice. With meditation, we can't just play awareness, a meditation record. We have no idea what meditation and the results of meditation really is like. So here's a little poem that's called Beyond My Expectations. Looking at the mind, it's not what I'd expect. Expectations can't define, and you can't expect to find. That's the nature of the mind. Here's a little poem about the nature of trying not to control thoughts, basically. Not trying to chase after them or hold on to them, even if it's a wonderful thought. This is just part of learning basic meditation. This one's called Rest Home. My thoughts, like birds aboard a ship, I let go free as they fly away from me. No need to follow on. And here's the perfect test. There is no place to go. All thoughts come back to rest. This is a little poem about practice. Practicing meditation is not the same as meditating. Practice is tough, it's boring, it's tedious, because you're learning a basic muscle memory habit. You're learning to meditate, not actually meditating. So this is just kind of a little bit of humorousness on my part, which mostly these poems aren't for me. They're just like, they're wonderful, but they're not just funny in themselves. This is called Testing the Rest. Learning to rest the mind really puts my practice to the test. So sometimes I just need to take a break and simply get some rest. I mean, that's just shows you the difference between really resting the mind and practicing resting the mind. Here's a more spontaneous one. It's called Time for Nothing. Excuse me for the moment, no matter the reasons why. I just need more time to do nothing but gaze into clear, empty sky. Now here's a complicated poem, and it's not even totally a correct poem. It's an imperfect poem because it doesn't quite follow the concept exactly, but it's still intriguing enough that it will give you an idea. And this is, again, not a poem about shamatha, but a poem about vipassana, or actually it's a poem about learning Mahamudra. It's called Seek and Not Find. If you find yourself, then you are not looking. You will never not find yourself unless you look. In other words, if you don't look, you will find yourself. If you look, you will not find yourself. That's the nature of having no nature. So that's a little complicated. It just has to do with the inability to really find the self. The self doesn't really have any permanent existence, but it's just kind of a collection of attractions and repulsions, things we like and dislike, that we draw around ourselves. And so I've written tons of stuff on the self, and that's just a poem about it. And here's one that almost I shouldn't even read, because it's another basic learning Mahamudra poem, which has a lot to do with learning to look not out, but look in. Look in at the nature of the mind itself. Look in, because we really haven't done that in the West. No one ever taught us how to do that. But in the East, in Tibet and places like that, they actually spend a lot of time not just looking out, we do that, but also looking in. And this is a poem that's called Looking at, Looking At. I'm looking at looking at. I'm not just looking at what looking at is looking at. No, I'm just looking at looking at. That is, I'm trying to. You see, when I'm looking at, it's not looking at I'm looking at, because what I'm looking at is also doing the looking at. So, am I looking at or looking at? Sorry, that one's just too... It's an imperfect poem. It's not your fault if you're having trouble understanding it. It's imperfect, but it's an attempt. Now, this next poem is called Samsara, which has to do with the cyclic world, this busy, busy world we live in. It's less spontaneous. It actually has a little bit of concept to it that I'm trying to live up to. So again, it's called Samsara. Not exhausted, uncontrollable, recurring activities animate my life and keep me ever moving through a waste of time. All the things I like to do. But every so often I lose my appetite and remain unmoved, not interested, already at the end of where I would be if I did all that. My time is taken up. Empty of effort and motion, with no direction, I lose my meaning and just stop wandering. I am so still. I don't have to keep my edge. The edge keeps me. At these times I know that rejecting this world will never work. Given time, even the world goes void and effortlessly rejects itself. Wait for that. Now that's the idea of, once again, not pushing. All of this stuff will come to pass if you practice carefully. You can't force it. This next poem is a little deeper, and it's really hard to explain. So I'm just going to read the poem, and we'll let it go at that. And if you can make some sense out of it, that's good. I can at some times. It's called Hummingbird. Swift and awake, poised in mid-air, he knows just where all the flowers are. Aware of the danger, but also the thrill, he drinks only the nectar that happens to spill. This is another more didactic poem. It's definitely following a concept, not so spontaneous, but it's a concept that I have thought a lot about. It's the concept of lineage, of how things are passed on and transmitted, especially in Dharma lineages. Anyway, I'll just read it. It's called Lineage. There is nothing transmitted, and nothing ever flows. A connection simply opens, in which samaya grows, and then mixing of minds, extension by recognition, transmission through identification. In other words, empowerment, a simple blessing, forever green, that mastering time makes sure that no less than the same is certain. This is lineage. In the history of Dharma poetry, there's a lot of poems about emptiness, and so emptiness is not something that can really be defined in words, which is why poetry is so useful. And it's not even something that I can explain to you here. But this poem is called Hear Emptiness, as in H-E-A-R, Hear Emptiness. Emptiness is all it takes to hear everything. Even the best arguments fall silent when heard. Emptiness can be heard above the loudest noise. Another reoccurring theme in Buddhism is the whole idea of offering. And one of the more common types of offering is a mandala offering. You've all seen those great mandalas, sand mandalas that the Buddhists make on a table. Can be like 4 or 5 feet in diameter, and then they sweep them into the sea or throw them in a river or scatter them to the wind. But this is a poem about mandala. In fact, it's of course called Mandala. A good offering gathers together naturally to a point of blooming like a perfect flower, and dissolving is gone. Petals in the wind, and then again. The object of mandalas is offering endlessly. It is all offering. I seem to have a whole series of poems about certain states, certain times, certain days when I don't really know what to do with myself, but that everything's just fine, and I'm in kind of a spontaneous, natural state of meditation. And this is one of those poems. It's called Meditation is Nothing. The books say, seek a place of solitude and meditate. But it's just the other way round. When meditation naturally occurs, there is no place in the world that you feel comfortable, try as you might. Not here or there, not doing this or doing that. Only nothing feels right. You just want to hold real still. Let the mind rest. And then park yourself somewhere out of the way, like on a cushion, or in a place of solitude, because nothing is going on. Here's a nice little very short poem called Samsara. Again, samsara means cyclic existence. The same world that early on makes it difficult to meditate, later makes it difficult not to. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's a concept called ordinary mind, etymology shepa. It's with us all the time, but we manage to ignore it. We're not aware of it. So this small poem is called Ordinary Mind. Crystal clear like water, so obvious we ignore it. It's everywhere but still not seen. This only thing that satisfies our thirst is not even on most menus. Here's a short poem about sitting meditation. It's called Resting. Sitting quietly, properly, with tongue to teeth, my body invites the mind to be at ease. Here's another short poem on offering. It's called Mandala Offering. The offering is not the offering. The offering is the offering. It's the giving, not the gift, that is the mandala. Here's another short poem on mind practice. It's the poem I particularly like. Mind practice, not an option, but a refuge, less painful than anywhere else. And just another kind of humorous poem called Post-Meditation. Post-meditation means what you do the rest of the day after you've sat on a cushion for a while. Post-meditation, if I am practicing all of the time, when will I have time to practice? This is a poem called Organic Mind. It's not one of my favorites, but it's reaching for something that I wish I could put into words. So, Organic Mind. Thoughts like waves ceaselessly arise and fall in the ocean of mind, water to water. Not in any way an impediment. Thoughts are, in fact, how we know that our mind exists, the very fuel of all awareness. Mind, the mother of all thoughts. Here's a poem on Vipassana, which translates to Vipassana is insight meditation. It's a very important kind of meditation. Anyway, Vipassana. Thoughts, the windows of the mind, are not something to follow or reject. I look through them. Wedged between the past and the future, like the eye of a needle, is this present moment. That too we have to see through. A big part of preliminary meditation practice are different ways of purifying the mind, clarifying the mind. This is just a short poem about purity. It's called Purity Is. Purity is being empty and without a trace. It's another poem on emptiness. I've written a bunch of them. This one is called Pure Emptiness. The power of emptiness is its purity, and it tames instantly. The result of emptiness is compassion, working with things just as they are. Emptiness loves everything perfectly, including me. And again, another short emptiness poem, or purity poem. Now this is an emptiness poem. It's called Yabyum. Yabyum is the word for when you see those Tibetan statues where the male and female are in a sexual embrace. Above the loudest noise, emptiness is. All it takes to hear everything, and even the best arguments fall silent when heard. Here's a very short poem where there is a little humor that creeps in, but I kind of like these poems, but I don't write them too often. It's called Here or There. When it comes to awakening, one thing is very clear. The closer I get to there, the more I find I'm here. The whole idea of karma is something that we end up thinking about a lot because it's one of the four thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma, and we really need to understand it. This is a poem called Karma Mirror. According to the Dharma, the world just as I see it is my reflection, a perfect mirror of the mind, reflecting karma, my every thought and action. Karma is pure result, the outer reflection of an inner reality that once ripened cannot be altered. No matter how carefully I choose my words, no matter how right I get my mind, no matter how close I hold my tongue, no matter how slyly I take a peek, I always only see myself peeking. The world looks back whenever I look, and clever as I am, even I can't sneak up on a mirror. A big topic in learning meditation and Buddhism in general are called the four thoughts that turn the mind. I've written a lot about them, but they're the four thoughts that are capable of turning the mind away from our busyness, our day-to-day doing who knows what, and where we actually begin to learn about the nature of the mind itself. And very briefly, the four thoughts are that this life we have is precious, we should use it well, that it's fragile, impermanent, life is like a soap bubble, that's what the Buddhists say, that karma, the third thought, is inexorable. There's nothing we need to learn about. Everything that we do has a very direct result. And the last one is this world is inherently undependable. We're never going to get all our ducks in a row. So those are the four thoughts which I learned from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche many years ago. And this little poem is called The Four Thoughts That Turn the Mind. This precious life, impermanent and brief, I know, my actions keep on piling up, and I can't quite get my ducks all in a row. Trungpa said to me so many years ago, by grasping just one thought or two, we will never turn aside. We must, he said, maintain all four and leave not one behind. Four precious thoughts that touch the heart. Only they can turn the mind. One of the four thoughts is called impermanence. And I find myself writing about that a lot or thinking about that a lot because I'm impermanent. This is called second thoughts. A sudden whiff of impermanence makes me wince and breaks my train of thought. What was I thinking? Eyes open, here now again, contemplating the stream of my own karma. Impermanence, the smelling salts of the Dharma. A very short poem called Attachment. The glue that holds the self together. Attachment.